Welcome, guys. All right, first the elephant in the room, the outfit for Albert. Stand up. Always, we love to see the little fashion show Albert puts on for us, okay? Yep, big round of applause, everyone. Come on. What do they call these again? Pocket squares, okay. That's a little bit more than square, but okay. All right, so before we even get into everything, why don't you guys introduce yourselves and just give a brief little bit of what you do so everyone knows what it's all about. So Albert, we can start with you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So Albert Thompson, work for Walton, Isaacson. We're a multicultural agency, by and large. And I am the managing director of digital innovation. So long and the short is, my task is really looking at the onset of technology and how we map that on our clients' workflow.
Hey everybody, Alex Teplish at Omnicom Health Group. I'm the VP of Digital Services. Our company is a network of marketing communication agencies in the pharma and healthcare space. And I lead our development center, putting together the teams and the projects related to digital work and digital campaigns.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Justin Rubin, Chief Creative Officer at Spectrum Science, and we're a global communications platform. We bring together advertising solutions, PR, SciComms, MedComms, clinical trial experience. My job and role is to inspire the creative team across all of those different capabilities and strategic pillars and bring the best solutions to our clients and to the industry.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, we're really here to talk about really the creative, the channels, what is working for you guys right now. But before we get into that, talk about some of the limitations or how it had to evolve. We saw and I think it's been evolving over the past 10 years, and especially since COVID. So it's not like it's all of a sudden this year everyone's getting more creative. But there are limitations, and there are things that were not being done earlier that now are happening, and just again with the consumer changes and their expectations. So let's sort of talk about that first. And Alex, I want you to start with that, because I know you really were focused on the limitations in a lot of ways when we had that discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first, because we're in a regulated industry, I just wanted to say that anything I say represents me and not my company.
Anything I say represents me and not MediaPost, okay? All right. We got it out there.
So there's been a lot of regulations in the healthcare and especially pharma space, which has limited what we can and can't say. Traditionally, the campaigns or the ads were very product-focused, one-directional. Basically, in the past, patients would trust what the doctors on their televisions would tell them, and it's evolved. It's evolved to people being more skepticism about the drugs, about what's out there. Patients are now more empowered to learn about their disease state and what the drug can and can't do and what interactions it shouldn't have. So the campaigns have evolved to inform patients more about that and less one-directional. Another way of being more creative has been with the data, using the data to identify who the true audience is. Not just one generic patient displayed in the ads, but a variety of different types of people. Not just the patient themselves, but targeting the doctors and their lifestyles, following them through with the way they lead their lifestyles, as well as caregivers, family members. They're very much involved in choosing the therapy for their family members and the people they care about. So targeting them as well in a creative way. And using that data to create patient journeys so that we can understand what each of them experiences throughout their lives and finding them in their comfortable places to target.
Yeah, and so Alex, I want, Albert, I want to, because you talked about the culture and really being able to reach people. You can't look at it one size fits all, and talk about that and how that is evolving and still needs to evolve.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I always talk about is everything lives in culture. And I don't necessarily mean just multicultural, cultural segments. I just mean the culture of. And I think the biggest challenge with pharma is that it has existed outside of culture for far too long. Consumption is largely a cultural act. We participate in culture. It doesn't matter if it's sneaker culture, ski culture, surf culture, black culture. But within that, it's how we identify everything in the world. It's how we make sense of it. It's obviously how we call BS on many things. And when you start to think about the idea of going inside culture, trying to identify around therapies, that is where the decisioning comes in. That's where we get the cues from. And I think being outside of culture, and there's, pharma is probably not the only sector, banking and finance, Wall Street has existed outside of culture. It's why we talk more about Cash App, Venmo, and Mint than we do Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. These things are very real. We talk a lot about CVS, but maybe not the latest biotech company. So when I look at brands that have started to make that transition, well, think about Hims and Hers. No fancy drug names, no confusing nomenclature, and they're using one of the most common pronouns. And then if you think where we are in terms of the queer era and how we identify him, her, she, this, all, I mean, when you go down the spectrum, they kept it very, very simple. And they went from just knockoff of minoxidil to, ED drugs to anti-anxiety medication, but it's easily identifiable because we are in this culture of pronouns. So using that as a way to inbound it makes a ton of sense. I think the other campaign I thought was brilliant, even though it obviously wasn't for me, was Phexxi. Supposed to be pronounced like sexy, the birth control. I mean, probably to the average guy, it looked like some spinoff of Bridgerton when you're like, okay, what's going on here? But it was very, very brilliant in terms of how they outlined and created a cultural moment around something that really has been a burgeoning aspect of the entire feminist movement, and that is giving women choices. That was very brilliant versus giving a very clinical sell to something that has always been very clinical. And that is an acknowledgement of that culture is going to move this category forward, and our creative and our narrative and storytelling will be grounded in it versus being grounded in the science. The science will take care of itself. And that's what this sector has to realize. You got to participate in culture so people will consider you ultimately to choose you. And I think that's the major movement that has to take place for this entire sector to thrive. And that has a lot to do why consumer health is chasing down the backs of CPG. They just have a better playbook than what pharma has had historically.
Well, also, I mean, in speaking to your point, Justin, I want to ask you this in terms of with so much competition, and you really need to stand out. You need to, so what for you, Justin, is making it so that you can kind of stand above the competition and really be noticed?
Yeah, there's two areas that I think about. One is the creative experience that we're building, and the other is craft, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but you look at our society, we're a tap and click, tap and go, right? There's 0 clicks. Life is sort of seamless and fluid, and then all of a sudden you get into health or life sciences, and it gets cumbersome, and then all of a sudden the burden, it would become antiquated, right? It's like, well, health isn't caught up. So I think for us and creatives, in order to stand out, we got to be not just creative producers, but creative reducers. We have to bring solutions that are taking away the burden of engagement and making it easier for health to rise to the level of the brands that we interact with seamlessly on a daily basis. So the brands and the ideas that do that are going to be really successful, and in my eyes have done that. Albert mentioned Hims and Hers. I mean, that's a great example. What they did was they moved the buying of the product before the doctor consultation. They're taking their lessons from lifestyle and our experiences there. So we have to be reducers in order to be really successful and stand out. The other is the craft, which you mentioned is, the regulations are the same, relatively, and the box is as small as it's ever been, but like the burden of better is on the agency, I believe. We've got to do a better job of bringing our clients better choices so that different is coming into the marketplace. And one of the ways that we do that is with the creative lexicon. It's called SHIFT that we work with. And each letter, it's an acronym. Is it strategic? Is it head turning? Is it insight driven? Is it fearless? And within fearless, is it different than what's out there currently? Right? And T is it transformational. So we're building creative with those elements in mind to make sure that we're bringing things that are breakthrough and head turning to our clients. And we're also asking them to evaluate that work within those variables as well. So if a client says, well, I want the guy walking on the beach, or so on and so forth, we could say, well, there's 5 different brands that are doing that. And ultimately, it's your choice. But boring is forgettable. So that's one of the ways that we're doing that, Lisa.
Well, and I think we've been hearing a lot of, in not patient-centric, say, or patient first, but patient within that. Like, they need to be a part of it. You need to think of that. And I don't know if that was Sue saying that or whoever, and that's really what we're seeing today that's different. You know, the consumers do expect, as you were saying, to be enticed in, not to, you know, you don't want to hear all the regulations or all the science behind it, but that has to get there, and there's only so much space. So how are you then creating this, like how are you changing that messaging? How are you changing that strategy to be able to meet the customers the way they need to be met, but still abide by that farmer rule? Justin, we can start.
Well, I think sometimes it's about what you don't say. I think traditionally pharma likes to try to cram all these different messages into the shortest postage stamp possible and try to say everything we can. And I think a lot of it is about storytelling and short form content and leading the patient or the physician on a journey, because they might be somewhere very different on the buying process and be more receptive to different types of messaging at different times. But I think emotion plays a large role. People make decisions based on emotion and then look for facts to rationalize it. Like physicians, for instance, you know, disease is personalized right now. You know, medicine's personalized. Science has to be personalized, and physicians are learning and relearning in this new environment. So we've got to go to where they are with really dynamic content and creativity so they feel something versus the facts that they're looking at on the white papers, on the charts, on the papers. So if you go to LinkedIn Brand, that's a great opportunity, right? That's where they're looking at that stuff. You bring in some really powerful creativity and juxtapose it to that, you're going to get noticed. They're going to notice it. They're going to learn in that unique way.
Alex, what about you in terms of the messaging? How do you need to really communicate?
Yeah, so I would want to connect with what Justin said about emotional storytelling. That's definitely a big part of today's messaging. Not just emotional, but in non-critical illnesses, using humor as a way to connect with people, to be more memorable. Always it's about the concept first, not necessarily using the latest shiny technology that's out there, but using technology is another efficient way to empower both the HCP and the patient to learn about these disease states, using content to empower the physician to communicate that disease state with their patients as well, alongside the brand. So creating 3D content, augmented reality, cutting edge things that will really set them apart in the explanation and the storytelling.
Well, we're definitely seeing more relatable, you know, when you're talking that personal, and as you said, the humor, I think making people laugh even for something scary, that is another way to connect. So let's get into, well, Albert, first, what's changed for you in the sense of that messaging before we get into specifics?
Yeah, I think brands got to get very serious about their moments of truth. First, second, ultimate, final, whatever it's going to be. And you have to acknowledge where brands are built. Brands are built in social, because social is built on word of mouth. So it's great to see the industry sort of, as they'd say, double tapping on social media as a stack between organic, paid, the use of creators. And I think they figured out we have to get people to participate. They have to get along before they go along. They're just not going to buy it. I think COVID was a massive lesson in the level of power that Big Pharma has lost because of the amount of people who just weren't going to be compliant with something as simple as a vaccination. So the tides have turned. We've gone from this notion of powerful countries to powerful companies to powerful people. And that is probably where it's going to sit because of the amount of tools and the proliferation of influence at the individual level. So is defining the engagement era that's very much sort of Web 2-esque. This sector has to realize that you have to get people to join into the dialogue, to care. And I think there are brands who've made it very easy and approachable to step into the conversation and then drive it, and other brands are still on the outside using TV as the waterfall, whereas conversation is the waterfall. And you have to start looking at mechanisms that pull those levers and activate them at speed, because the speed of the consumer is moving way faster than the ability to pump out a TV spot. So you have to be able to move at the speed of conversation to stay relevant in the conversation. And I think that's just one of the lessons that this sector has to turn its head around very quickly on, that other categories have almost mastered at this point.
Well, and I think talking about getting and speaking to people, and Justin, I think you mentioned it, or it might have been you, Alex, but it doesn't have to be bells and whistles. It can be very simple. So talking specifics, Justin, what have you been doing that's, to Alex, Albert's, why do I keep calling you Alex? Albert's point, getting into the people, talking, communicating to the people, but in a very simple way.
Yeah, I mean, just something that comes to mind. I'll have to white label it because of legal and regulatory. But TikTok's been very, very successful for us. Again, short form, connecting with large audiences with relatively unknown diseases, and being able to use that lever to create really unscripted conversations. Like Al said, the power is with the people, and allowing them to be part of the conversation, see themselves in that conversation. And there's some authenticity about that. We're not pushing messages at people. We're not talking at them. It's a two-way conversation. We're allowing them to be a part of that. So that's been working for us really well in one instance. But I think in order for us to really be resonant and to do our jobs really well, we got to get out of the way. What I mean by that is I was on a creative review yesterday before I was able to join you guys, and the team was sharing these wonderful, wonderful ideas, and we're talking back and forth, and somebody on the call said, well, the client's not going to want that. And well, there's truth to that, right? We got to be good listeners, and we don't want to do the wrong thing. We have to be responsible. But the real conversation should be, well, what does the client need? And what the client needs is what the patient needs or the audience needs. And we have a duty to be exacting when it comes to that. And that's our real audience. So creatives with their egos, marketers, clients, we got to take ourselves out of the equation and serve the people with our creativity, because it all comes down to credibility. Like I was mentioning, it's for them. It's not for us.
Well, you mentioned when we spoke during the prep call, you talked specifically about bringing creators together and going into the communities. But how were you able to achieve that? I mean, obviously it was very targeted, very localized.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Lisa?
During our prep call, you mentioned a campaign that you did that you actually went into the communities and you worked with creators. Can you talk about a little just like how you made that happen?
Yeah, I can't. That was not approved prior to me coming here. It was the day before. But co-creation, right, is definitely important, especially in rare disease communities where that trust is not as big as it is in other areas. So you're building for their needs, and I've seen that happen very successfully in my time in the hemophilia community and doing work for them. And it's actually incredibly rewarding to work with people that closely outside of your own discipline to help build them something that is going to make their lives better. So sorry I couldn't bring that case study to bear. I'd lose my job fast, and then I would be able to get to my car after this.
I don't want to get anyone fired, so I'm not doing it. I'm not pushing for that. Justin, can you talk about, Alex, can you talked about also working within the communities as well. Is that something you can still share?
Yeah, without naming the brands or the specific campaigns, but I also wanted to reference Jordana's presentation with Allegra. That was similar to what I will be talking about, where it's a holistic approach. There's many different tactics being used. It's truly omni-channel or multi-channel. You're targeting people in different areas, but really it's about having the end goal is empowering the patient community with additional tools that they can use to improve their lives alongside whatever drug they're using or being helped with. Creating the social communities with moderation, of course, because it's very dangerous to leave things open in the pharma world. Having the tools, the apps built for patients to be able to track symptoms, reminders of their intake, having Q&A sessions with experts, pre-recorded videos, bringing all that together, and then using traditional media to drive people to those tools so that they don't feel like they're just being pushed a drug, but they're being given an improved lifestyle with the help of that company with the additional tools.
Well, and when you're putting something like that together, I mean, you are leveraging all different channels, but I think the crux of it is going into that community and really connecting. Where does that, how does it impact, can you sustainably do that and continue to do that? And it must be very localized. Are you having to restructure it for each area that you're going to? So what goes into in terms of logistically to really get this to work?
Well, there's a lot of efficiencies that need to be built in the back end, so which the public doesn't necessarily see. Using data, using reporting, patient segmentation, identifying the audience, and not always targeting the largest segment of the audience, but maybe targeting some of the smaller segments because they are typically ignored. and everybody's competing for the large segment. So you may have a better result with some of these smaller segments and communities.
So, and Alba, for you, I know you talked a lot about social and getting creators involved and how important that is. But again, as we've heard, you have to also moderate them. That you can't just let them go at it and hope that they do it well. So how do you, one, get these creators involved? How do you choose those kind of partnerships? And how do you really, what type of creative works best in terms of getting out your message?
Yeah, I think one of the sea changes that happened and needed to happen was the onset of artificial intelligence being built into the creator model. And I mean creator model, I mean from a procurement screening, looking at it. So we were at a table last night. It was a round table. We were talking about one of the partners we work with called Captivate, who's algorithmically can start to look at not only with deep learning, a more comprehensive background of the creator, but their following. Because a lot of time we love the creator, but the people following aren't people who align with the business or business objectives or can't drive the business outcomes. We just like the front face. You have to get into the idea of decisioning. Whoever the activate is going to start and be a part of the conversation, and do they belong there? And what is the level of risk in doing so and in activating them? I think that's a major proponent. I think the other thing is we have to get away from the silo of organic, run by the brand, paid social run by another agency, creators another agency. It's a stack. It's not independent silos, because if you're trying to create a market conversation, that's something to effectively be orchestrated. And I think a lot of brands just do that poorly just because swim lanes developed and they don't talk. So you can't maximize the opportunity of activating creative talent when all the pieces aren't essentially conjoined as an ecosystem. It's all an ecosystem, it's not a lane. And so I think that's the other thing that we've been able to do just because we're a full service shop, so everything is there. But I've been on calls and you can realize that the right and the left and the other hand don't even talk, don't even know what each other's doing. This isn't really gonna work. And this is part of the reason a lot of clients are disenfranchised with the creator model, because they're just churning through the ecosystem of talent. They're not building a mechanism as if it were the talent business and they were looking at ambassadors. And I think that's got to change so that the people they enlist are stickier to the brand versus just churning through because they found a SaaS platform that can pump out names. So I think in particular for pharma, where it's more high risk, the level of diligence and prudence of who you put in front of the brand to represent it is going to go to an all-time high. I think it's a great thing, but I think that you have to start looking at the long game of who's going to create continuity to continue to build the brand in an expansion loop and not in a one and done that happens very much on sort of the CPG side where people are just punching through creators left and right.
Also, what about in terms of the channel? You know, I mean, you have different, on TikTok, there's certain, well, we heard people, I mean, I think then when Jenny was talking about she couldn't advertise half the time. So you have different channels, Meta, they have different expectations, different personalities. What is working for pharma? What are you finding that really sort of stands out?
I think you have to think about the type of narrative between what TikTok and its environment gives you, and it's great to see brands sort of inbounding. In my talks with Bayer, I know they've been advocating on the consumer health side to get more involved in TikTok. But look, the waterfall is still YouTube, because YouTube is for the long view. People then cut up assets for the other channels. And from a monetization model, the creators make more money on YouTube anyway. So you have to look at creator class, where they start to build and how they chop it up and move it across other platforms like Instagram Reels. I think brands also have to get serious about building a conversation. So that mean and based on the audience. Snapchat might be in play. Pinterest might be in play. Reddit is probably going to be massively in play just for the sheer fact that there is depth. In consumer health and on the drug side, you need depth to sell the story. TikTok doesn't really reward depth. There is a death scroll we talk about, which we will go through, 90 different posts in a series of time. But when you think about what it takes to sell in an indication, you have to look at environments that are best for selling in the indication, not the bias about what's most popular, the bias about what the sell-through proposition and what platforms can carry that. Social is omnichannel. There are a lot of platforms. They're not two. The world is looking at two. There's really 6 that are highly viable, maybe more depending on your model. I think people have to get very serious about the idea of using different channels to move different pieces of the conversation, because they have different moments of truth in the value chain. And it's not about 1 or 2 of them that's going to be your moment of truth. You might have to use 6 of them based upon how you sell through the conversation. You got to think about the patient-doctor interaction, how dynamic that is, how it evolves over time. Map that on social channels, and I tell you, your playbook will probably change overnight. But what we see is people just do what they did yesterday, instead of really looking at how, human psychology starts to work and digest information.
Well, and I mean, you're specifically talking social media, but let's open it up to the whole strategy, the whole mix, and how much does social play a part of, I think it was Miles talking about that each one brings you to the next story. Like, maybe TikTok is that quick engagement, and then you go to the next channel and the next, and whatever that may be. So, Justin or Alex, in terms of how are you looking at that storytelling, and what channels are you work? Are you there? Is it a process, or is it just put it all out there?
Well, I think in the past it was more about repeating the same ad across all different channels, and now it's just like the companies have gone through digital transformation, so have the people. They've become more tech savvy, more empowered to do their own research, and I think giving them bits and pieces, both in branded and unbranded ways, throughout the different channels is really what puts the whole story together. But using the data to identify who your target audience or audiences are, what channels they're using. So it's not omni-channel where you're just pushing everything out there to every channel, but the most important ones, the ones that your audience is actively utilizing. Empowering them so that when they come to a physician, they understand the science. They're not just coming there clueless and still with skepticism, but they're kind of empowered in advance to have similar knowledge, obviously less than a doctor, but to have that knowledge so that they're there with the right questions and feel more confident going forward.
Justin?
No, I mean, I agree with that. I think it's all about understanding the patient journey or the physician journey and moving them along that continuum and knowing where there's going to be a conversation starter, where there's going to be more of an appetite for long-form educational content, where is the branded content going to fit in. And I think, we have been using some of the same channels because, what works, right? And I think we have a risk-averse industry to a degree, and we all want to be the first to do something, but we want to see an analog to support that. And part of it is we've got to be brave. We've got to do our research. AI is going to help us uncover some of those insights and where we need to be. And we're going to fail at a certain amount of time, but it's different for every brand. It really is. I think we have a lot more leeway in unbranded than we do in the branded space. I think the mix, both of my fellow panelists are right on. It's been my experience in our journey here at Spectrum.
One thing I would add is that, this is a persona-based built business. And I think a lot of times brands get enamored with one or two profiles because it's usually emotional triggers that get us to lean in and effectively do something. So I think that the idea of dynamic creative, dynamic messaging, to a degree it can happen, needs to come into the frame. And look, the great thing about AI and some of these tools is that they will iterate and create additional assets based on an asset library, based on the actual active campaign performance, and almost a recommendation engine of play around with this copy, this tone, this imagery. What that does for a category with heavy regulation is it shortens the time back to market to coming up with new narratives instead of an agency making a hypothesis about what we should do and moving it to the entire value chain of approvals to the engine sitting out front of the ad targeting saying, here's some recommended other adaptations to try based on trying to get that audience over there or those personas to resonate or click or respond, and then see about getting that approved and putting that into the cycle of campaigns. And I think that has to be part of the playbook in terms of really being more dynamic in the ability to actually connect. Half the reason response rates are what they are is because the other audience can't connect with the narrative of storytelling or creative or the banner ad they're looking at. So there has to be an iterative way of getting right back in front of them with one that does connect to actually pull them downstream. And I think that's probably one of the bigger advancements that needs to be embraced in the space so that the sector has a richer opportunity to build a broader foundational base of people who care about the indications that are in front of them.
Well, before I want to open it up to you guys to ask questions, but just very quickly, first thing, what are you excited about for next year? Like, what do you can't wait to test or do, or just right down the line.
I think our sort of great space race is in video right now as it relates to AI and companies like Soro, and we were talking about Runway yesterday. It's like, it's amazing what we're going to be able to do and what we're being able to do now, create our own movies. I think it's going to be, the presentations are going to be absolutely incredible and engaging. They already are. Like I said, we're already dabbling in them. I'm also excited about AI-generated key opinion leaders, and the credibility that can bring within those conversations. I think that particular cohort is very interested in that. There is a credibility factor that I think they would embrace, and we have to co-create with them in order to make that successful, and also co-create with our partners in med and legal and regulatory as well. We can't be bringing these new solutions to them at these meetings that have taken a very long time to put together and expect everybody to get on board in 10 minutes and fully understand. We have to bring them along the journey. So video for me is like, it's going to explode, and the things we're going to be able to do are going to be unrecognizable compared to what we've been doing in the past.
Yeah, I'm also excited about AI, both generative AI and using it in the back end for efficiencies of companies. Generative AI is definitely exciting with all the creative that will come out of that, and new ideas will expand, and you'll be able to create variations of the creative using it. But one example we're doing at my company with AI is through the MLR process and the copy process, we're able to teach models, train models on the ISI or the legal language of that drug, and then ask it to scan the marketing materials and see which of these marketing materials are aligned with our claims, which ones are deviate too much from a claim and we need to reword it, and then AI helps come up with new creative ways of addressing that same claim to different audiences. So that's one. And another area I'm excited about in technology is digital therapeutics. So there are companies out there who are creating pure digital therapeutics to help manage people with illnesses, help treat the illnesses without a drug. But in some cases, the drug companies partnered with a digital platform really create a holistic approach for prevention and illness management. And I think that will definitely expand. There's laws being passed to fund those things so that you can actually be prescribed a digital therapeutic alongside a drug.
And Albert?
Yeah, I would say how AI is going to remap the entire value chain from, Pfizer's Charlie, their AI engine. I've had conversations with a few companies about developing their own discovery engine for intelligence seeking, beyond what they have institutionalized research, to the dynamic creative. There are companies that will create dynamic creative for CTV, dynamic creative for banners. Obviously, I talked about the onset of what it's going to do in the creator space and a deeper valuation. I think if you looked at all the piping, it will come into the frame to every element of it and change it and accelerate it. Just in terms of, I definitely agree with what Justin said in terms of bringing regulatory and legal into the conversation early as technology continues to accelerate, so they understand the implications, even to the point of getting things organized in the wheelhouse to be more effective to play and market. Because if it's going to come into every domain, then you're going to have to bring them into every conversation so they understand what this now means for moving forward.
Great. All right, well, you guys, this has been awesome. And anyone have any questions? Let's open it up to you guys.
Oh, we have questions. Okay. Oh my God. I'm going to hold you all three to this. All right. Let us know who you are. Where are you from?
Hi, Jan Weinstein from Publicis Health Media. I'm just going to also throw out there, besides being so fashionable, Albert is also a ninja savior on the adventure course. So I'm calling him out for that too. Thank you. I've had the good fortune of working in pharma for a lot of years, worked on a lot of different campaigns, and had moments where we knew that we were either in culture or making a difference. So for me, it was being on the cover of Time magazine with a campaign a week after we launched with the question about this condition, being parodied on Saturday Night Live, having the late night talk show hosts, making fun of our product, and probably most importantly, hearing from a patient's wife that seeing our ad prevented his suicide. So these are like really resonant moments, and like we're doing something important and something culturally embedded, right? So I'm just interested from all of you personally, have you had moments in your career where you said the ads we're doing matter and they're really resonating in culture? Like if you've had those experiences.
Those are hard to top. Your examples, those are great.
I've been lucky in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned hemophilia a little while ago, and I remember very vividly creating a campaign and again working closely with that community and having a mom just break down in tears saying, "This is me, this is my child." That was pretty intense. I think to answer your question, there's the external, but also within the company. There's a moment in time not too long ago where we had to really work hard to bring people on board and to really look at culture and diversification in a way that we haven't in the past. And when you get something right internally and you're partnering with people who have a wider aperture than you do in certain respects, it feels good from a cultural standpoint and a business standpoint. So those internal wins are really, really special, as well as some of the things that validate our effectiveness outside. So I've witnessed those. Those have been special.
I mean, I'd love to see something on the cover of Time magazine or parodied on Saturday Night Live. But I think another part of the culture is seeing authenticity on social media of patients who are truly being helped. That may not be so public-facing, but in the culture itself, most people are on social media, and they're sharing their experiences, hopefully positive experiences, and that helps the company, the authenticity, the reliability, and other patients learning from their peers.
I think for me, it's been underserved conversations. Years ago, I was working on Gardasil for HPV, speaking to Latinos, because you're talking about a segment that wasn't given a voice at the time, and it's not acknowledged, but something that was very, very important, especially when addressing with younger women. So that becomes a cultural moment of we see you and you're part of this conversation. I think more recently it's probably all the oncology work, in particular for Black women, where, okay, less acceptable to the broader disease state, more likely to die. So it's like they have to be in the conversation when the mortality rate is far higher, because the conversation just isn't happening. But those who probably might too, but obviously for the reasons of you can't overlook the populace you don't want to speak to when they're part of the conversation of the poor outcomes.
We have a couple more.
Yeah. Hi, guys. Ed Marr, Clear Channel. It's great hearing how you guys think. My question is, do you give thought to us being in the 7-second attention economy? And does that adjust your approaches? And more so, what I'm really interested in, I haven't seen any data on it, but do different demos, are you following the attention of different demos? Younger people have a lower attention span, right? That's my question.
I mean, I might be young then. I'm approaching 50, and I have very short attention span. I mean, I think, listen, we're two-screen people these days. I mean, I can't watch a Netflix show without having my phone out and cut. I don't even know what's going on half the time. I'm toggling back and forth. So I think there's a negative attention span. So I think what we have to work with makes our job harder as creatives, because not only we have to do something meaningful, we have to be so provocative and disruptive to even earn that negative piece of that attention span. So yeah, we're paying very close attention to it. I think that informs the short form content versus the long and the journey that we've been talking about a little bit today, and the success that I know we've seen in TikTok and things of that nature, where, all right, short is best, less is best versus more. But there's a place for all of it, and I think that's important as well. But yeah, I mean, we're fighting for time.
I think the attention span has reduced because of all the channels that are competing for our attention. And that's why it's important for the multi-channel model of marketing and delivering small bits and pieces of the information across the different channels and not having the same information coming through each channel. This way, the user journey, which is really users, meaning anyone who can be an HCP, a patient, a caregiver, a family member, will learn along the way as they're exploring the different channels based on the demographic and the data that informs us which channels are most important to deliver to those people.
Yeah, I would give 2 movies, Fast and Furious cannonball run. Cannonball run for all you people who have enough gray hair. Right. Pharma is not in a 10-second race. If you are in the business of trying to algorithmically game TikTok for vanity metrics, you're going to fail the top marketer at your enterprise. What you have to do is maybe look at elements of the sell-through that will work on TikTok for 7 seconds because it's a piece of the product benefit, or the benefit. You know, highly moisturizing, boom, you could do that on TikTok all day. You want to get into the other benefits of cream or dealing with eczema, you probably need to use another channel to really punch it in and explain it out. That's how you have to look at sort of value chain of the platforms based upon the business you're in. But I remember a notable drug company asking, how do we make our creative more sticky in 2 seconds? And I'm like, the guy who opened up this session, the CMO, he is not interested in your 2-second sell-through. Your sell-through of all your products probably takes 5 minutes at a minimum. You have to figure out how to break that down in spaces and places to effectively do that. So I have nothing against TikTok. I think you have to use it appropriately. But you have to look at all the other things that can move a conversation and allow a consumer to stitch together the story in a series of places, because that is how they're going to make the decision anyway. That's why I said you got to look at the decision-making model and what moves mind share, play there, and then break the conversation in pieces that they then get to put together, and then they get to that ultimate moment of truth that, okay, I'm going to choose this product.
All right, we got time for, I think, one more quick one.
Yeah, and I hope you guys don't hate me for this question. Mark Miranda Body, Santa Fe. So, you know, when I was at agency, what always frustrated me was that, you know, creative was over here, comms was over here, media was over here. I hated that. And I always saw creative as content creative as we were evolving. Being on the client side, what frustrates me, a key point that frustrates me, is you've got all of these different players trying to tell the same story, creating their own narratives singularly. What can you guys do, or what is it that agencies, creative agencies, are doing to break down those barriers and those silos and not just make it about an ad, but as what you were saying, Albert, it's the channel. Let your audience piece together the story, let your audience lead, and tell that story in different ways. You know, I'm opening that to any of you, but I would love your thoughts on that.
I'll take a swing at it. I think, look, only the consumer is guaranteed to win. The creative directors think they're the ones winning. And that's just part of the populace of creative thinkers and where they go. When you let the consumer decision-making model, and let's say in pharma talk, the patient pathway dictate it, everyone should be able to find their role in place and moving them across down that pathway and how they break apart the idea of making choices. Human beings, we've been doing the same thing for 10,000 years. We just got better tools now. And some of the things we still suck at. So when you really get into it, you have to have some level of governance, a North Star that's bigger than the people in their departments of what we have to get to. I think that's what has worked for us. The North Star is here, it's bigger than all of you, and the things we were tracking were here before you, and they'll be here after you. So you need to kind of get on frame, and not letting departments run as be the tip of the sword. And I think that in basic brass tacks, that's how we've been able to manage down people just understanding their place in the value chain of producing solid, good work, and doing so. And you hope you have a client who really lands the plane on that early. Like, it's not about your lead is media, your lead is creative, your lead is strategy. This is what we got to accomplish. And I want everybody in the room pointing in the same direction from the outset. And I think clients who do that very well from the beginning, there's a waterfall into the agency to make them happy to be compliant in that. When clients have not done that, then it becomes a SHIT show, unfortunately.
I think it's also how you convene as an agency. Our culture is a culture of collective creativity. You know, creatives are strategists. Strategists are creatives. Account folks are creative. So when you come together to solve a solution, the creators are not going off to figure it out and report back to everybody. You're coming together as a team, and you have a better vision of the solution because you're building it together. And then you could send the experts off to make their piece of the car and what they're good at. But I think that's a great question. So internally, you can crack that code, and we've seen it, happen really, really successfully by empowering. I mean, you have 300 people plus being an ideator. I mean, that's a big value for a client versus just one person.
I think taking an approach like filmmaking in the beginning of the journey, for example, scripting out what the story is, whether it's an emotional story, a humorous story, scripting it out and storyboarding the whole experience, and then allowing each channel expert, each department to take it further within their expertise. This way you have a cohesive story from the top, and each of the specific experts know how to take that story further within their own channel. And then on top of that, adding tools that will give people the additional bonuses besides the actual prescriptions that they're taking, so that they have loyalty and other additional useful information and interactions with the brand, so that they can continue to subscribe and be interested in that treatment.
All right. Well, this was awesome, guys. Thank you so much, Albert, Alex, and Justin. Big round of applause.